Hello, I am Red Mage, and welcome to a Magic the Gathering video featuring the color red. In today's video, we're updating Mono Red Aggro for 2024. I've done videos updating Mono Red Aggro a few different times, and I want to go through card by card and kind of explain why each card is in the deck at the quantities that it's at. So first, to touch on cards that I think you definitely want to play 4 of. Those are Kumano faces Kakkazan, Monastery Swiftspear, Phoenix Chick, Charming Scoundrel, and then Play with Fire and Lightning Strike. To me, these sort of form the core of the deck. These cards give Mono Red Aggro the speed that it needs to compete in such a powerful standard metagame. So for those cards, I think 4 is the minimum number. You don't want to play less than the maximum. But some other minimum amounts, Feldon, you definitely want to play 1. If there were fewer options in Standard, you could play up to 4 of this, despite it being legendary, if we were desperate for cards to fill out the curve. That's just not the case in Standard right now. Goddric and Squee. I think that 3 and 2 are the optimal numbers for these cards, but I would say 2 Goddric and 1 Squee are probably the minimum that you want to play, regardless of how you're building the deck. That is, if you're going for a more traditional Mono Red Aggro. If you want to play Cacophony Scamp, Picnic Ruiner, and a bunch of other pump spells, you could definitely take both of those cards out of the deck entirely. But assuming you're wanting a traditional-ish Mono Red Aggro, I think you want at least 2 Goddric and 1 Squee. You could go up to 3 Squee. I don't think 4 of either one is correct. Both being legendary 3 drops, that'll make the deck a little bit too clunky. Monstrous Rage, you definitely want at least 1. It's hard to imagine less than 2 being optimal. I'm playing 3 here. I tried 4 for a while, but I found I was in situations more often than I would like where I had a Monstrous Rage and no creature to cast it on. So I think 3 is a good number. You definitely want at least 2, I think, because it's just so good at breaking through mono white, soldiers, any number of things. Witchstalker Frenzy, again here I'm pretty sure 2 is basically the optimal number. I think 1 is too few and 3 is probably too many, though I would be more inclined to play 3 than 1. Sheoldred specifically is what you're targeting with this, but there are plenty of other larger creatures in Standard that might be 4 toughness or even just 3 toughness, and you want to make sure you have more than just 4 lightning strikes to kill those really important creatures. Adeline is another really important creature to be able to kill with a Witchstalker Frenzy. And then finally for non-land cards, we've got Voldaren Epicure. I would love to play 4 of this card. In fact, I would love to play 16 of this card in a deck. It's one of my favorite creatures of all time. I'm playing 3 here only because there are so many powerful cards available to Mono Red and Standard right now that maxing out on 1-drops doesn't seem like the way to go in terms of maximizing your win rate. I think Goddric and Squee are just too good and you need to be playing higher numbers of those. Though if you told me you wanted to go down to 2 Goddric and 1 Squee in favor of a Voldaren Epicure and a Bloodthirsty Adversary, or even a second Feldon, I wouldn't fault you for that at all. In the mana base, I rarely ever see this exact configuration of lands, but to me this is the correct configuration. I'm not saying that that is objectively, statistically, factually proven by any means. But there are 2 factors that lead me to playing fewer Mishra's Foundry than most people play. 1, the number of 1-drops in the deck. If your opening hand is 5 1-drops, say Kumano, Swiftspear, 2 Phoenix Chicks, and a Monstrous Rage, and then you have a Mountain and a Mishra's Foundry, your hand goes from incredible to pretty mopey. So I want to minimize that possibility as much as I can. The other situation where you can have some colored mana difficulties is with Goddric. 2 red mana is not particularly difficult in a monocolored deck, but if you're playing 3 Mishra's Foundry, you're going to have draws where you can't do anything on turn 3 because you have 2 Mishra's Foundry and a mountain and you can't cast your Goddric. So I play Mirrex. It can add colored mana the turn it comes into play. I think it's also a better utility land against blue-white control most of the time. Not strictly all of the time, by any means. So there are very few circumstances where you have a Goddric in your hand and you can't cast it when you have 3 lands. There would have to be a very special set of circumstances for that to be the case, and most likely those would be hands that you would mulligan anyway. If your only 2 lands in your opening hand are Mishra's Foundry and Mirrex, you almost certainly should not keep that hand. In fact, I feel comfortable saying you 100% should mulligan that hand, no matter what else is in it. Sokenzan, some people play 2. I've seen that go badly so many times, and the truth is you don't really channel it all that often, and so I think 1 is the perfect number. You want the option there if you draw it in the late game, but having 2 legendary lands I think is too much of a cost. One last thing to mention, I have seen some deck lists play fewer than 4 Play with Fire or Lightning Strike in order to play more Witchstalker Frenzy. I understand the impulse behind that. They just hate losing to Sheoldred so much. That's understandable. But I don't think it increases your win percentage to play less than 4 Play with Fire or 4 Lightning Strike. If you were going to take this deck list and alter it just by adding more Witchstalker Frenzy, I would cut either a Monstrous Rage or a Voldaren Epicure to do that. Maybe one of each if you wanted to go up to 4 Frenzy. I don't think that 4 Frenzy is optimal. I think you will get Frenzy flooded too often if you do that. But if you really felt strongly you wanted to play 4, I would cut 1 Monstrous Rage and 1 Voldaren Epicure for that. So those are the cards that I'm playing in Mono Red right now, and the reasons why I'm playing them. I hope you enjoy the gameplay, and we'll be back at the end to wrap up. This is a great hand, and we are on the play. So it's good to have the option depending on what they play. So here we definitely want to play 2 creatures instead of just a Charming Scoundrel, since they could have cut down. So, actually, since we have 2 Epicures, maybe we just play the 2 Epicures. I was going to Swiftspear attack, and if they tried to cut down, we can Play with Fire them in response to save it. But then we're just playing 2 1/1s next turn that don't have haste. This way, sure, they can cut down the 2/2, but then they're not going to cut down the Swiftspear, and we'll have all our haste creatures saved back so we're able to attack with anything. So let's find out. Looks like they don't have the cut down. Not ideal. So unfortunately, we have to 2-for-1 ourselves. Or at least give them the option of getting a 2-for-1. Oh. That's the worst block they could make, because we can save the Swiftspear. Alright, I'm pretty fine with the Raffine We can just attack into it. They can eat one of the 1/1s, but that's fine. We're going to deal a ton of damage. If they eat the Phoenix Chick, we can bring it back next turn. Which we might not even do because we want to get the Kumano trigger with the Scoundrel. Bringing the Phoenix Chick back is not a cast of the creature. So we wouldn't get the counter, the extra counter on it. Deep Cavern bad. Okay, well, we'll bring back the Phoenix Chick then. Unless we draw something else we want to cast. Lightning Strike. Okay. So is there some way they survive the Phoenix Chick but not the Lightning Strike? I don't see how. If they have 2 Elspeth Smite, hit the Phoenix Chick, hit the Kumano, block with the bat, they would survive. But they should not then be able to survive the next turn, so that seems fine. And the reason not to Lightning Strike here is that there's a good chance that after this turn we're not going to be able to have 3 attacking creatures, and unless they have another bat or duress for some reason, we'll be able to cast the Lightning Strike later. Okay. They can't win if they block like that. This is a pretty good hand. It's worth considering holding back the Epicure for the Goddric. But I think it's better. I mean, we're most likely just going to want to play the 3 creatures out anyway. Aha, Kumano. This is human. Yeah. So we'll play Kumano here. If we draw a land, we'll play Goddric. If not, we've got Phoenix Chick plus Monstrous Rage. Depending on what they play, if it's Thalia. Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. So we're 2 for 1ing ourselves here, but that's just what you got to do. We can't let them gain 2 life a turn. Well, at least we have an answer. I wonder if this is some kind of... It doesn't look like it. Oh, it might be. I was going to say if it's some kind of 5-color pile. Yeah, all right. I mean, this is not the worst because they don't currently have any way to gain life. And we've got a bunch of Phoenix Chicks. Assuming they put it on the NT. Yep. Yep. Adeline is fine. That takes up their whole turn, and it doesn't get them any closer to winning. Or to surviving. Okay. So, this thing cannot do anything. Activate an ability. They do not have any activated abilities for 1 mana that they can activate. So if we... Well... If we draw a land, we win. I mean, or a burn spell, or a Kumano, or a Epicure. So I guess we'll dump this Goddric. That probably seems weird, but the Squee at least gives us 2 bodies. Alright, this doesn't. Oh. So this is a really good hand. It's especially helpful when we're on the draw that we can have a 3/3 Feldon into a Goddric with Celebration. Looks like it's the mirror. Phoenix Chick is definitely the opening from your mono red opponent you want to see the most, because it's the least indicative of a super strong hand. Foundry, a pretty good draw. Not only is it a creature land, it guarantees we have Goddric next turn. Here, if they have Play with Fire or Monstrous Rage, it does them no good. Or not Monstrous Rage, Witchstalker Frenzy. Okay. They're gonna... Surely not Witchstalker Frenzy, the Feldon. Okay. So Monstrous Rage. They must have just drawn that this turn. So we definitely play Goddric here since it has Celebration. The question is whether or not we want to hold back the Kumano. They have something. It's probably Lightning Strike. And if we attack with everything, which will not be lethal, we're definitely attacking with these two, there's no question. We should have lethal next turn without the Kumano. So I'm going to leave it behind, knowing that there's a good chance that I'm just going to be chumping with it. If they attack with the Swiftspear, I'm going to block it, they Lightning Strike our face, and we're just chumping. But that might be enough to help us survive until the next turn. So they're saving the Lightning Strike for the Goddric. They don't think they will have lethal. Okay. Okay, so maybe it was just a play with fire the whole time. That could be the case. All right. So, to guarantee Celebration with Goddric, we can make a treasure with Charming Scoundrel. That sounds pretty good. We then definitely have lethal Awesome. So it looks like they didn't have anything there, possibly just another land. But what we're thinking about is sequences of a card in their hand plus a top deck that could allow them to survive and then win the game. There are a lot of combinations of potential cards. And so what we wanted to do from this point is go to damage. We could pump Goddric for lethal, but there's no reason to do that. They might have Witchstalker Frenzy. If they do have Witchstalker Frenzy, what we want to do is kill the Phoenix Chick and the Swiftspear with a Play with Fire and a Witchstalker Frenzy of our own. That prevents them from being able to win the game next turn. We deal 4, they go to 5, and we'll have Squee to finish them off on the next turn, on our next turn. This isn't the greatest hand, but at least we have ways to use our mana on turn 2. Oh, hello. Well, I'm definitely willing to trade here. It's not surprising to me that they didn't, and I would prefer not to, just because we've got Monstrous Rage and Play with Fire. So I think we just go ahead and cast it now. We'll probably Play with Fire the Siren they target with a map token if that's what they do. Because it looks like they're desperate for something, and this kind of keeps them from getting their value. This definitely could be a counter spell, in which case I think regardless we want to cast the Squee, but especially because the Squee can potentially come back from the graveyard and the Goddric cannot. Of course, this might be Annoyant with Affliction. More likely go for the Throat or Bitter Triumph. I mean, they 2-for-1 themselves, and we'll be able to get this back later, so that's not too bad. Oh. That's cool. Alright, so chance that we die next turn. Super small. That being said, we could Kumano plus Witchstalker Frenzy. I was going to say we can Goddric plus Kumano, attack with the Goddric, and then next turn we can Witchstalker Frenzy. But if they don't have that Bloodletter, they have nothing, so I think that's fine. This also sets up multiple possibilities. And they do not like those possibilities. All right, we are on the play with a great hand. You'll love to see it. Especially against a highly ranked player. I love having the option to either cast a Scoundrel or a Swiftspear plus Monstrous Rage. Well, the Epicure is the only creature without haste. So I think I'll get the counter on the Swiftspear, and then I'll cast the Epicure. Also worth considering, Charming Scoundrel, make a treasure for Goddric. Okay. The question here is, if we attack with everything and they don't block, are we going to Monstrous Rage anyway, or would we play a Scoundrel post-combat? I don't think we would do that. So I'm going to go ahead and cast the Kumano now to make sure to get the Prowess trigger. This is the correct block to force your opponent into a 2-for-1. If they had blocked the Kumano, it looks like they could eat it, but they actually can't with a Monstrous Rage because the Kumano would have 3 toughness. And another Dinnick is pretty good. Map token on the Dinnick is even better. That's super scary. Well, at least we can cast the Goddric. We really need a Witchstalker Frenzy. But, I mean, we can get the Goddric in the air next turn with the Charming Scoundrel. Whether or not we do that will depend on how much mana they leave up. They leave up all the mana. Okay. So that's got to be Wandering Emperor, right? I don't see what else that could possibly be. If it is Wandering Emperor, we can't even attack with Goddric because they can give Dinnick a +1/+1 counter with First Strike. I mean, we could... I guess if we Charming Scoundrel first, we can. They almost certainly have Wandering Emperor is the thing. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to cast the Feldon, assuming that resolves. Oh! I forgot we had a Kumano flipping. Okay. Well, that's good. In that case, do we attack with everything? Probably not, right? They eat a creature and gain 3. So we'll attack with just the Feldon and the Goddric. They might be scared to block the Feldon. Okay. They are not. It's possible we'll get a Play with Fire, something that we can finish off the Dinnick post-combat. Oh, destroy evil. Okay. There we go. Oh yeah, we don't have the mana for Witchstalker Frenzy anyway. So let's hope they don't have a counterspell. Looks like they might. Okay. That's okay. That is totally fine. Boat. All right. So instead of cycling the mountain with the blood token, I think we Charming Scoundrel draw a card. That is exactly what we want. So they can trade Cathar Commando with a Kumano if they want to do that. Looks like they will. Makes sense. But they have, you know, next turn 2 cards in hand and no board, so Wedding Announcement is fine. Goddric is good. So they have to chump to survive. If they block the Scoundrel, they will die. Assuming they have nothing in their hand. Alright, so as long as they don't play Wraths, we win. And we're back to wrap up. The deck building challenge for Mono Red Aggro is balancing the speed and consistency of the 1-drops with the power of the 3-drops. I feel like this specific build strikes the right balance for the current standard best of 1 metagame. It's fast without losing steam in the mid to late game. It's powerful without being too clunky, and it has enough interaction to deal with a wide variety of circumstances without too often being in situations where you have just removal in your hand and nothing to target it with. One card that I didn't mention before was Inti. I was playing 2 Inti in my last version of Mono Red, and it is a very good card, a very good 2-drop to put in Mono Red Aggro. But I think because it doesn't have haste, it's just not consistent enough. It's a high variance card. Sometimes it's really incredible, but other times it doesn't do anything in a situation where you just need something that can deal damage that turn. If you try this version of Mono Red, let me know in the comments how it goes for you, and I'll see you in the next one.